Solution Counseling Center and Mental Health Court Program to be awarded to American Work LLC for an initial term of 1 year. 2-year contracts will automatically extend for an additional 4 one-year terms unless either party provides notice of termination.
Mr. Johnson?
Let's see.
You'll want to go ahead and put it on the agenda, right? I mean, consent, correct?
Well, it's on the agenda. It was just being pulled. They're modifying the contract and.
Okay, so we're done with that?
No, sir. He's getting ready to explain to you what it is we're trying to do here.
I'm sorry. This is my.
Yeah, I'm okay, but you guys wanted to consent it, so that's what I was doing.
Why you trying to put it down? I'm sorry.
I'm good.
They wanted to pull from the. Thank you, ma'am. So he said explain because the contract that was on the agenda was incomplete, they had error.
All right, that's fine.
Yes, sir.
So here's the modified document here.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's see. Here. Okay, hold on.
We ready, Ms. Bonner?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, Ms. Bonner. My name is Nolan Martin. I'm the Court Administrator for Superior Court. I'm here before you today in support of the motion to approve the recommended service providers for RFP 22-140. The motion before you today is the correct motion. However, the proposed contract simply did not group the programs together correctly. We sent out an RFP for 3 treatment courts: felony drug court, mental health court, and veterans treatment court. The proposed contract grouped mental health court with veterans court, and that was an error. What needed to be done was felony drug court and veterans court lumped together. So outside of that, the motion before you today and the motion before the Public Safety Committee last week is the correct motion. And I'll answer any questions you may have.
I see Mr. Hassan on here. Mr. Hassan?
No, sir, I'm sorry, that's just.
You good, Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So just for clarity, this is not for mental health court. This is just veterans and felony court. Is that what we're talking about?
No, sir.
Okay.
We have the procurement committee awarded 2 contracts. One contract to Georgia Family Crisis for drug court and veterans court. American Works received the contract for mental health court. In the template, contract template, they were simply lumped erroneously together.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Garrett?
Motion to approve.
Second.
You got a motion, Ms. Bonner?
Yes, sir.
To approve.
Okay. We're voting?
Yes, ma'am.
It's unanimous.
And I want to thank Mr. Brown and his staff for their assistance in this matter. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Bonner.
Can we go to item number 10 so that the administrator can enumerate the changes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you all receive this document from the administrator? Can you put it on the screen? We'll just put it on the screen for you.
Madam Administrator.
Commissioners, as you can see, as reflected on the screen, the financial impact has changed from the federal grant that the Augusta Public Transit is applying for. The numbers that were shown on the commission agenda item should now reflect the still 85-15 split, whereas the federal portion is increasing to read as $6,271,325. Augusta's local match is also increasing by $10,750 to read as $1,118,175.
Motion to approve.
You got a motion to approve, Ms. Bonner?
It's Mr. Friend and Mr. Hassan.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're voting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. McKnight and Mr. Dennis Williams. It's unanimous.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe that's it, right?
Yeah. Let's go to number 31, Ms. Bonner.
I beg your pardon?
Number 31.
31.
Yes, ma'am.
What is 31? Let me see, 31. Okay, item 31, motion to refer this item to the full commission with no recommendation to allow the administrator and the Parks and Rec director to identify additional funding sources to complete construction of the Henry Brigham Community Center project.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Scott?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to motion to approve moving forward with the contract award for Henry Brigham Community Center project to R.D. Brown Contractors in the amount of $8,354,000 to be funded by Splash 7 and ARP 1.6 million.
I will second
Hold on.
that,
Hold-
but
yeah.
I know we have questions.
Well, yes, sir, I think we have the wrong item up on the screen. Item 33 should be, tasking. 31. That's,
Yeah, in my book, it is what you read.
okay,
The
all right,
31
we're
that
good.
The 31 that you have up here is not in the book. That's 33,
3, yeah, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, 33.
We're on
You're on
31.
31 in the book, and it's the Brigham Center. That's 33 in the book. But I know we have questions, but Ms. Scott just made a motion for approval, 8.3 million for the Brigham Center.
You have your motion right now.
Mr. Hassan did a second,
Okay, it's Ms. Scott,
and Mr. Hassan.
Mr. Son approving,
And I know we have questions.
8 million.
But before we do that, I want to go to the administrator to talk about the different funds. I know the question was last week that they wanted you to look at pulling different funds, or ARP and or SPLOST or what have you. So can you explain to the commission what you found?
Sure. In reviewing several funding sources to include ARP as well as bonding options for the future, Based upon timing, because this bid was the second time in which this project was bid, and it opened on April 20th, pricing holds are good through July 20th. And so we do not have enough time to solicit other funding sources or utilize other funding sources in order for this project to be under contract in enough time while pricing is being held. So it is my recommendation to utilize $1.6 million from ARP to fund this project. Concerning bond options, that is still an available option that could come down the line because bonding looks to be done in the fourth quarter of the year. We have had several discussions with other parties to include AEDA as well as Parks and Recreation to see how we can make changes to bring back recommendations for the commission to do other projects down the line.
Okay. I'll go to Mr. Frandon.
I'm sorry, clarity on what you just repeated. You said we can't discuss that now because it's not until the fourth quarter on the bonds? Is that what you meant? I'm sorry.
Not that we can't discuss it. Staff is already in discussions with various parties to include AEDA as well as Parks and Recreation for us to bring back proposed options for projects that can be bonded in the fourth quarter. So that information will come back to you.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, my concern is not the centers, the funding, because we got, again, community centers without lighting. We still haven't heard anything about SPLOST 8 being able to go straight to Parks and Rec as of this moment, and we got parks that are still not open in the summer because of lighting issues because of what happened at, at the park. And I guess my question is, if we're going to do this and use SPLOST 7, why are we not doing the lighting aspects at like different community centers that need it out of SPLOST 8? Like, why are we not getting the answers on SPLOST 8 from the funding standpoint to start using those funds?
Well, Commissioner, you're asking why are we not getting the answers. The question that was posed to me last week was to identify a funding source for Brigham. And so as you recommended, we also looked at options for bonding packages that will come in the fourth quarter. And in doing so, we've had conversations with Parks and Recreation because the commission approved how the SPLOST schedule is already to be allocated. And so in looking at that schedule, as well as what the voters voted as far as how much of those dollars will be bonded, Finance and the Administrator's Office will bring back to you a recommendation on what projects we will bond, which will hopefully include the lighting concerns that you're just bringing up.
Okay, let me ask you this. If we approve this today, do we have the ability to switch back to a bond without and take back this 1.6? I mean, I don't think we're going to spend all $8 million by the time that December rolls around. I guess my question is, can we?
No.
Or if we approve it today, do we have to use the ARP funds to do it, or can we talk about the bond as part of this center as well once that time comes?
I don't have an answer for that question at this moment.
But it would take another whole vote to do that.
Well, and the timing is the biggest concern with the Brigham project.
Exactly. Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I guess these questions will be directed towards the administrator or finance. In regards to using funds from SPLOST 7, where are these funds being allocated and condensed from? Where are we capturing these funds from? Like, what projects aren't getting done, or were there overages that, or were projects, did they come in under budget and so we're able to capture this? I'm just.
If you would, ask Mr. McDowell to speak to those particulars as he is aware of how those projects are funded.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. If I understand your question correctly, as it relates to the Henry Brigham project, this was a project that was part of the SPLOST 7 referendum, so this is no recaptured dollars in terms of.
SPLOST 8?
No, SPLOST 7. Mm-hmm. This is a SPLOST 7 project. These are what we're requesting today is additional funding, so you can move forward with the project in totality.
I thought Brigham was added to SPLOST 8, not SPLOST 7.
No, SPLOST 7.
Okay. So the 1.6 in ARP funds, is this a federally accepted use for these funds to go towards a project like this?
It is, because it will enhance the health as well as recreational space, which are both categorized under ARP.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. You know, the Henry Brigham Center is a very important piece of the community. And I'm all for building it. I'm all for making it a Class A facility. But my question is this. Is there anything that we can maybe rearrange within the plans of building the center? Can we scale back on something? Is there any way or anything that we can do that can scale back the additional cost?
I want to say something because I am the commissioner and I'm the one that put forth the idea or what have you. I want to say no. Diamond Lakes was built, 20 years ago? And Diamond Lakes was supposed to have 3 gyms and several other things. Diamond Lakes has 1 gym. And my understanding was that they were going to do the other 2 gyms in the second phase. The second phase has not come. We need to give the community something that the community can look forward to, the community can be proud of, not a box with an empty shell. We want things in there that the people can go in and not only participate but enjoy and have a good time and be proud of what's in their community. The Brigham Center is not just a center in District 5. Folks come from all over Augusta and other places to enjoy and participate at the Brigham Center. It's named after a man that did a lot for Richmond County and Augusta and what have you. The center that was initially built was built by prison labor, and there are 2 different types of labor. You got unskilled and you got skilled. Well, they had unskilled. You can go to Brigham Center and look at the brick work and look at how the mortar, it comes all over the brick and how it was painted. The office looks like a cave. You got one little window where you can look out and can't even see the whole gym floor. The roof is caving in. My understanding is that they've had a crane over there twice trying to pull the roof up. And now we want to give them subpar? We want to give them something less? I don't see that. I don't see that, and I don't understand. We got $10 million, and they got to go somewhere. So we may as well let the people enjoy it. Instead of sitting around trying to save money for whatever your project is, bring it forward. Don't sit up here and pull a room out of the Brigham Center to give them less weights in the weight room or what have you. If we're going to do something, let's do it all the way. And stop. I don't know. Director of Recreation, you got something to add to it, you add to it, but I'm getting kind of emotional due to the fact that we want to do subpar work on something.
Never said subpar work, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
Never said
My turn?
subpar.
Yes, sir. Are you?
I forgot to ask my main question, Mayor
Well,
Pro
hang on
Tem.
a second. We got other folks. Mr. Clark, you finished?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Frayden, back to you,
Thank you. I mean, there's no reason to get upset when people just asking questions, first off. I mean, my main question is, why did this government go back out to bid and up the cost by going back up to bid, and there was no scope change? Why did that happen?
Because you only had 5-point-something million in the first.
No,
cost.
that's not true.
And the first cost came back at 7.3 or 7.4 or 7.8.
And then it went up to 8.
They were trying to get a lower bid, and it came back higher. So if you go out again, it's going to come back to $10 million. So I don't see why you're sitting here.
I'm asking the question.
I don't care. I don't see why you're sitting here doing this.
I can ask a question, sir.
Well, ask the question.
I'm asking the question. The taxpayers ought to know.
Well, the taxpayers ought to know what they need to get, but you just.
I'm just asking.
Whatever you want to do, you.
Please calm down.
I mean,
good.
I'm just asking the question
I'm
of
good.
why did we
I'm good.
rebid a project
Go ahead.
and there was no scope change? And it's an additional $1 million. I mean, I think that's a fair question to ask, sir.
Are you through, Mr. Franney?
I want to hear my answer.
Mr. Director of Recreation or Procurement, or whoever can answer this question?
Yes, I mean, we can make scope changes. I'm not saying we do, but we could.
As it relates to the procurement process, I would defer to the Director of Procurement. However, I'll say this about the project. Historically, when you bid projects, if you rebid them, because that gives everyone an opportunity to look at numbers, you historically would get lower numbers. Due to the climate that we're currently in, that hasn't been true in terms of rebidding projects. At the time, it was a recommendation by the previous administrator to look at rebidding this project. And so we went back out in hopes of getting a reduction in project costs, as well as an allocation of, I think, about $1 million that was added to the construction budget at the time. And then the recommendation was to move forward with it being rebidded. And so we move forward in that vein.
Thank you. I mean, what's she gonna, are you going to say anything?
Procurement?
In addition to what the Recreation Director has given you, which was correct, and thank you, Ron, after the former administrator decided to proceed and add the money, we found out that both of the contractors that bid on the project the first time around, both of them were deemed non-compliant. And that stops the whole process. Okay, and when you look at the numbers that they were given, that was given to Augusta, you were looking at a 42% over the budget submittals. You have a law in Article 6 that says anything that comes in over 20%, you can't move forward. So that was the reason for the rebid.
Is there any protest currently in any of these bids?
No, sir, no protest has been brought forward.
Okay, nothing about anybody getting stuck in an elevator or anything about protesting any bid?
I don't understand when you say get stuck in the
Like they couldn't get their bid in time, or there's nothing about
There
this?
has been no protest brought to the procurement department.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I call for the vote, Ms. Bonner.
Okay. Voting.
Mrs. Bonner,
Yes, ma'am.
can they put the motion up here on the screen, please, on the, so,
Yeah, can I read it to you? Okay. It's a motion to approve moving forward with a contract award for the Henry Brigham Community Center project to R.D. Brown Contractors in the amount of $8,354,000 to be funded by SPLOST 7 and ARP $1.6 million.
thank
Is
you.
that good, Ms.? Thank you. You're welcome. That motion fails 5-5, with Mr. Johnson voting yes, Mr. Mason, Mr. Bobby Williams, Mr. Ben Hassan, and Ms. Francine Scott. Voting no, Commissioner Dennis Williams, Ms. McKnight, Mr. Franham, Mr. Garrett, and Mr. Clark. Item 33, sir.
Ms. Bonner, can I do a recount, please?
A recount?
Reconsider.
Reconsideration, you mean? For this?
Reconsideration.
Oh, okay. That's Ms. Scott and Mr. Hassan for reconsideration of item number 31. Yes, Mr. Hassan and Ms. Scott. Are we voting, sir?
5-4.
That motion fails. With Mr. Johnson voting yes, Mr. Mason, Mr. Bobby Williams, Mr. Hassan, and Ms. Scott. Voting no, Mr. Dennis Williams, Ms. McKnight, Mr. Franham, Mr. Brenton and Garrett, and Mr. John Clark. Item 33 is a motion to approve tasking the Recreation Director to bring back to the commission meeting this week. Yeah, no, they took it off. Next week, a directive on priority list for repairs at Riverwalk and Julian Smith Barbecue Pit. He's to present the list.
Good afternoon again, Commissioner, Mayor Pro Tem. I have a quick presentation as it relates to agenda item number 33, but I want to add some context to the discussion. As we spoke, I guess a week or so ago, about recommendation towards the Riverwalk as well as the barbecue pit, the intent wasn't for the discussion to be a discussion where you have the barbecue pit against the Riverwalk, but a holistic conversation about these projects that we have in Parks and Recreation, and that these projects that we need to move forward on in Parks and Recreation. So I want to add some context to why there was a need for us to kind of shift away, if you will, for making the Riverwalk a priority, but to address some outstanding needs as it relates to these overages on these projects. Parks and Recreation was allocated $1 million from ARP funds via approval by this body and the previous administrator to utilize those funds at our discretion with the approval of this body as it relates to open green space and recreation facilities. And during that time, as we looked at the many needs across the city of Augusta, at that time, it made perfect sense for us to address some of the concerns and some of the needs at the Riverwalk, open green space trail, and park site. But with additional information, I was stuck with trying to make sure that we can make all of these projects happen and not just one or two of these projects happen, and trying to leverage as best as possible that $1 million allocation. And so that $1 million that was allocated, I felt at the time we could tackle 2 or 3 of these projects and then come back later to revisit some of the Riverwalk conversation with some SPLOS 8 fund once those funds start coming in. Because I do recognize that as we just saw with the previous project, there's limited resources, and we have to be good stewards of taxpayers' dollars as we move forward, as well as trying to move forward on some of these projects that are definitely necessary and that we've said to the voters via their approval with the referendum that we were going to move forward on. So staff and myself, we walked the Riverwalk just yesterday because I think a picture is worth 1,000 words as it relates to the condition of the Riverwalk. And as I said before, this is a jewel to the community. This is a jewel in terms of not only the citizens of Augusta, but those that come from across the river to enjoy this feature that we have in Augusta. One of the things that we recognized yesterday, we met several groups. A lot of people come from North Augusta, Aiken, South Carolina, to visit the Riverwalk. They was on the Riverwalk as of yesterday, and they love the open green space, and they love this particular area. So I just wanted to show you a couple of things as it relates to some of the priorities and concerns that you all had tasked us with taking a look at. But again, I say this is still one of our jewels that definitely needs some love and care, but it's not as bad as some try to portray it to be. So we'll talk about this. And again, we looked at 11th Street all the way up to 6th Street, which is about a half a mile. And we walked the top of the Riverwalk as well as the bottom to look at several issues and concerns and just try to wrap our arms around some of the things that should be a priority. One of the conversations that we had, I guess, at the previous meeting was around this temporary fence that you have at the bottom of the Riverwalk. Well, that was placed there, as you guys, as the commission recalled, during April's flooding, right around Masters time. The water levels got up pretty high there, and so we put this temporary barrier there so we could make sure that no one tried to walk off or impede any of the areas there in terms of thinking that they could utilize that space when they couldn't. So we put that temporary fence there. We've since asked I asked staff to remove that fence, so that fence should be no longer there because it wasn't an original fence there. That's where, if you see the green fence to the right and then a little bit to the left, that's where the fence line stopped. So there wasn't any fence line there previous. We just added that for a temporary purpose due to the flooding. But a lot of issues that you see here or that you will see are mostly ADA issues, as well as some structural needs for the Riverwalk. So as we walked this particular area and looked at some of the cracks that we get some of the complaints about, a lot of it has to do with some of the trees that are in place at the Riverwalk. My understanding from talking to the original designers of the Riverwalk, this is a levee. It was never intended to have big trees in this particular area because it does compromise the structure and the integrity of the levee. But as you can see here, a lot of the tree roots compromise some of the brick structure that are in place there. Plus you have the granite on the edges that are not conducive to the type of traffic that we have on that particular Riverwalk. And again, these are just areas where you see the tree roots that have compromised a lot of the brick areas, as well as created some trip hazard. But again, these are things that you have to go looking for and searching for them to be noticeable. A lot of the cracks doesn't impede on anyone utilizing that space. As it relates to the fountains, the reason the fountains aren't operable, my understanding, the water on that side has been turned off. It has been off for a number of years now. My understanding, there was some coordination between the utilities department as well as the Central Services Department, and I think those conversations are probably still ongoing as to how to remedy some of those leaks that were taking place underneath the surface there, which were creating some issues in your mechanical room where you have all your electrical wires and that sort of stuff. But again, that's the rationale or the reason behind why those fountains aren't working. And then the rest of these areas, as you look to the right, if you see those areas highlighted in orange, those are areas that staff go on that particular Riverwalk daily and highlight those areas. We have an on-call contractor that goes out and address those issues once we are able to highlight those issues. And this is an ongoing thing. just based on how this particular area is designed, we're constantly operating sort of in a revolving door of repair, and then coming back later finding there's more areas that needs attention as well. As you can see here, some of the areas, if you see where the mortar is in place, that's where they've made some repairs, and then you see where there's more repairs that needs to happen. So once we fix something, there's always something else that's causing issues and concerns as well. To the right is the mechanical room, and that was the area that was experiencing some flooding due to those leaks from those particular pipes that are constructed within the Riverwalk itself. Of course, that area, because the water is off, we haven't experienced any flooding there here recently. This area here is down at the Augusta Market area. This is the area where we have some electrical safety concerns that we were definitely needing to address with those conduits. All those wires need to be pulled out and replaced. And so, again, that was why the recommendation for us to move forward with some of the electrical work and repair work that it was needed on the Saturday market, because on the weekends, this place is pretty packed. And a lot of those vendors need those outlets that you see to plug up their equipment and so forth and so on. So we was recommending that we were able to move forward with some of the repair work that's much needed in that particular corridor as well. To your left there, you will see what they call the old Japanese garden. Again, because the water is not owned at that, not operating at that particular site, you don't have the water there, but there's definitely some much needed repair work there as it relates to some of the wiring there. We've been in conversation with the particular group that maintains that garden. One of the problems we have is they bring over the equipment, and some of those lanterns come from Japan, but they experience a lot of vandalism and theft. So as quickly as we can get those things incorporated, somebody either come and steal them or destroy them. I mean, they come all the way from Japan, and so.
Let's go ahead and get some questions, because they asked you some pointed questions, last week, and wanted you to go forward and answer some things. I think some of the commissioners have some thoughts that they want to share with you, and maybe you can answer some of those.
They talking to your mic.
I see Commissioner Garrett is up first. You have questions, Commissioner Garrett?
Don't always.
Yeah.
So this question is for Director McDowell. As we're looking at this Riverwalk issue by itself, you see the repairs that are needed, anywhere from the amphitheater, from, the power not working still, to this fence that needs to come down. I'm not sure about the tree issue on the levee that you're talking about. I mean, those trees have been there for decades, and that levee is still just as stable as it's always been. If we're not going to plant trees back on the levee, what are we going to do in regards to that green space? I mean, that's my first question. If we're not going to plant trees, are we going to do anything? Are we going to plant grass and not cut it, or some other kind of ground cover?
Well, I would say, particularly for the maintenance staff there, they do a fine job of maintaining and turning the grass and all that sort of stuff with a 5-man crew for that particular site. As I spoke with, or as my staff spoke with the original architect of this particular area, it was told to us that it wasn't supposed to have trees of this magnitude. It was supposed to have some shrubbery there, some smaller trees that you can maintain and manage, but nothing with a root system that would compromise the integrity of the infrastructure that's there. So it wasn't designed to have the type of trees that you have there. So of course, the trees are there now.
How do those trees end up there?
I'm assuming they were planted there by some previous group or someone else. I'm not really sure who. But one of the recommendations that you guys asked in terms of moving forward would be to have an arborist come before us and to assess all of those trees and those tree roots in that particular system to see what we can do with those trees, because they are an issue to the integrity of the levee, but they also provide shade for that same area as well.
Have the Corps of Engineers raised any issues with the trees?
I'm not sure if they have or they have not.
Okay, so looking at the temporary fence that we know needed to come down, and I'm glad that you're moving forward with getting that done. You look at the total scope of this project, these repairs that are much needed, how much do you need? Do we have an estimate on this?
Well, to just address your plumbing issues, my understanding, most of that is beneath concrete, which is then your levee work. So you have about 3 or 4 feet of concrete, and then you have the brick pavers on top of it.
Have you asked for help from our utilities department?
My understanding is this was essential services as well as a utilities project that haven't moved forward as of yet, and I think they have been working on it for several years. But they haven't gotten to a solution to that. But my understanding is you would have to almost bore down and drill down through the concrete to try to locate where it's leaking at.
Administrator, I think you had something to add as the previous director for central services.
Sure, absolutely. So Director McDowell is right in that this was a aged matter. I recall and have documentation that showed former Utilities Director Tom Wiedemeyer assisted Central Services with locating the problem, and it wasn't until Director McDowell and I spoke today that the problem had not been resolved. So now that I know that there is still an issue outstanding, we'll definitely make sure we bring in our current Augusta Utilities Director to solve the problem.
So today's the first time that y'all have talked about this, even though we've been talking about this for weeks. So, Director McDowell, I guess the question is, what do you need from us in order to go out and just get an overall estimate of what is needed to get this tourist attraction? You know, this is prime riverfront property that should not look like this, should have never gotten out. And I understand that it's not all on you. You've only been here a couple of years, but what do you need?
My recommendation would be severalfold. I think the first thing you would do, because of the seriousness of the plumbing magnitude, is to get someone to assess that so we can make sure that we address those leak issues and see if we have to compromise the Riverwalk itself, because you don't want to go in and repair all the brickwork and then you end up having to cut all that out to get to the pipes to address the leaks. So I think that's the first step in the process. I think you also bring aboard an arborist to take a look at all the trees in that particular area and see if we got the right trees planted there to give us some type of estimate on what we can do to quell some of the issues from the tree roots that are compromising some of the brick pavers on the riverfront, as well as some of the trees that are inside the lower end of the levee as well. I think someone needs to take a look at that professionally and then offer up some recommendation based on that as well.
What would be your time frame in getting all that back to us?
Well, if the item is approved to move forward with the allocation, I think at that point we've moved forward with solicitation.
What allocation?
If we're going to move forward with allocating the $1 million or the $700,000 for the Riverwalk, then that we would have to utilize those funds to then hire an arborist, or we would have to hire an engineer to go and take a look at that. We'll procure that, and then we'll come back with someone that can move forward and give us these answers from a professional standpoint.
All right. I may have more questions, Mayor Pro Tem, but I think there's a big line behind me.
Mr. Hassan.
Yes, sir. A little disappointed again. Because the $700,000 that's being mentioned was not for any of that we've been showing. It was not for any of the project that we've been showing. The $700,000 was for upgrades to water fountains, installation of water features and shade structures, and additional restroom facilities. That's what the $700,000 was for. But let me, so we've kind of expanded the scope of everything. But let me kind of back up for a minute. Mr. McDowell, Mr. Chairman, speak to the director, please. Last week you mentioned something about the Saturday market. Mm-hmm. And what were you asking about the Saturday market?
We have a bid currently to address all the electrical concerns down on the, I think it's like $335,000 to move.
How much
forward.
do you have?
About $175,000.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, you know, with that being said, with what's in the book was the department's requesting $1 million from the American Rescue Plan, which says it's been allocated, $700,000 for Riverwalk, which the body work we just mentioned, $150,000 for Diamond Lake Regional Park. Now, what was going to happen with that money?
The Diamond Lake, that allocation was for tennis expansion.
From Mark Academy?
That's correct.
Okay, so now we got, okay, need $150,000 for contingency. So let me make a motion here, if you don't mind. the $1 million, allocate the $1 million, $7,000 for the Riverwalk, the $150,000 for Diamond Lake Regional Park, and the other $150 goes to the Saturday market to get that body of work done. There's no contingency money here. The $150 need to be for the Saturday market, and that's my motion. I hope we can get a second on that.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, Ms. Bonner, you get it? He was talking so fast, but did you get it?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir, go ahead, Mr. Park.
Thank you, sir. Director McDowell, just 2 or 3 questions here real quick. Does the Saturday market vendors pay any rental fee?
They pay a permit fee
A permit fee. How long is that permit fee good for?
for that day, or if they get it for the year, but usually they do it by the week.
And what's the fee on that?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's no more than like $45, $50 per slot.
Okay. The other thing is, I know we're supposed to charge a rental, which I'd never do this. I think this is ludicrous to charge a rental for, to have a wedding at the Japanese gardens or use that little stage for anything. And I know we have a fee in place for that to be used. Yeah, I don't particularly care for that. I think that ought to be gratis. Is there any consideration to bringing the engineering department in to help solve some of these issues? It's like you mentioned a while ago, that you would have to bore through several feet of concrete to find the pipes that are leaking. The water's already turned off. Would it not be more cost effective to just forget about those pipes buried in the concrete and maybe relay pipe a little more shallow?
To your point, Commissioner, I think you're right. I think that's why that's above Parks and Recreation purview. That's why I would recommend that we go out and solicit either our engineering department or some other private companies to come out and take a look at that, because I think their level of expertise can give us the correct approach to that, and then what the remedy would be for that. Of course, we don't have anyone on staff to be able to do that. So yes, to your point, I think that's the only remedy for that, is to get a professional to take a look at it. I did want to touch base on something that Commissioner Sun said as I was trying to get through the presentation to get to the point. What really the impetus behind the agenda item was the recreation components of the Riverwalk. I never got the opportunity to get there, Commissioner Sun, but we was getting there as it relates to the playground feature of it, because really for Parks and Recreation, that should only be our role as it relates to the Riverwalk, is the recreational aspects of it. But in totality, if you look at the entire body of the Riverwalk, there's some serious structural issues that need to be remedied if we're going to continue to move forward and highlight that as one of our premier areas for tourism, et cetera. And a lot of these issues have been laying dormant, and we haven't really addressed those. And you need to address those before you go back in and try to tie a splash pad system into it, because you got to tie it back into your water system and to your pipes, et cetera. So you got to correct those issues before you can even get to the implementation of the recreation components of the Riverwalk itself.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. McKnight?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay, anyone else before we do a vote? You get it, Ms. Bonner?
Yes, sir. You want to hear it?
Yeah, may as well. Yes, ma'am.
The request for the $1 million from ARP fund to be distributed with $700,000 for the Riverwalk, $150,000 for Diamond Lakes, and $150,000 for the Saturday market.
All right, voting.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I have a question before we vote.
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson.
Just for clarification, this isn't a new million, correct? This is money that's already been allocated?
Oh, that's correct. Yeah, this is a $1 million allocation. Correct.
Thank you.
All right, voting.
Mr. Hassan, for your motion. It's unanimous.
Okay. So Did we consent 34?
No, sir. And could we ask, out of consideration for our alcohol petitioner, if we can get back to his business?
Okay.
Item number 32, Ms. Walton. Unanimous. It's unanimous. Thank you.
To the commissioners and Ms. Bonner, the applicant was in the chamber, but when the items were approved, he assumed his was approved and he left the building.
Okay. So we'll have him at the next committee meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Item 34, motion to approve Fleming Tennis Center lighting in the amount of $202,707 to be performed by the Southeastern Tennis Courts.
Got a motion and a second. Mr. Garrett?
Before we vote on this, I was going to ask my colleagues to consider also making sure that the lighting repairs that need to be made at all of our facilities are included in this. That way we can handle this all at one time. I know that comment or that, that delay came up earlier in another conversation, and I think that as we're discussing improving lighting, need to make sure that all of our facilities are backed up.
Is that an addendum to this, or you just conversation?
Well, hang on a second. That'll have to be a substitute motion.
Well, we don't have a price on that either, I don't think.
No.
But I just think that it's something that I just wanted to put it out there just so it's all on top of our minds that, as we're making future requests on these agendas, that we are making sure that these lighting requests are getting done in a timely manner.
Yeah. All right, we have a motion and a second.
Voting, sir.
Voting.
It's unanimous.
Yes, ma'am.
Item 36.
Okay.
Motion to approve for the commission to have a work session on the EMS contract drafted by staff, Augusta staff.
Mr. Hassan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to my colleagues. It's been over quite, I'm sorry.
Clarification.
Sir?
We voted some time back to have the session. All we need is a date for the session, if I'm not mistaken, right, Ms. Bonner? Hang on a second. I think we voted to have a work session, but we didn't approve a date.
No, you didn't. I think you did, but you didn't approve a date. But like I said, just was committee cycle. The commission hadn't approved. He didn't approve it.
Okay.
It was just a committee cycle, and so it's just a recommendation to the body at that point.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. You on.
And so, like I said, this was just part of the process when we put this subcommittee together for quite some time, that this would come back and we would know what's in the contract. So it's on the agenda today. The commission can vote to approve it, and that's what we're talking about. That date would be tomorrow. Would tomorrow be the 8th?
Yes, sir.
At 11 o'clock.
Okay.
That's my motion, Mr. Chairman. Motion to have the work session tomorrow at 8 o'clock on the EMS contract drafted by the city.
All right, we got a motion.
Substitute.
Wait, okay.
Hang on a second. Do we have a second?
Second, Mr. Sun motion.
Do we have a second for his motion?
I second it.
All right, Mr. Johnson will second.
Okay.
Second the motion. Mr. Clark?
Substitute motion.
Yes, sir.
With respect to my colleague from the 6th, we've had work sessions on this before, and we pretty well know what we want in a contract going to Gold Cross. And this has been months and months that we've been doing this back and forth, and I think it's time to put an end to this, and let's bring back something
Okay.
from Gold Cross. So I make a motion that we instruct the administrator and our attorney to take the MOU and whatever contract that they're working on and meet with Gold Cross and their attorneys within the next 7 days and bring back a contract for us to look at on the next committee, or excuse me, the next full commission. And that's my motion.
Second.
All right, we got a motion to second for a substitute, but we got some more discussion. Mr. Franon?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. My question is, the commission work session, the maker of the motion, Commissioner Son, is Gold Cross going to be in attendance?
I mean, it's a public meeting, so anybody can attend. It's a public meeting.
But are we requesting any information from Gold Cross for that work session? Since
Not at this time. No, not at this time. This is strictly for us to see exactly what they came away with, and that's our EMS team. I think I heard in my colleague's motion just now, just the attorney and the administrator, in all honesty, would not be adequate. You need all our EMS team to go who put the contract together and decide to be a part of that process.
Yeah, and I think that's why, I mean, the work session, we went through it. I think you were even chair of a committee, 6 months. We came back recommendations. I think we're spinning the wheels by having a work session when we're not even going to have the experts there to kind of give feedback, answer their questions, like have the interactiveness that we do to truly make a partnership like we do for the citizens. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, sir, Mr. Clark.
I'll add to my motion that members of the committee be involved in that session.
The EMS team.
No, what
EMS team?
No, what committee?
In the motion that I made to meet with them.
From which committee you're talking about?
I'm talking about my motion.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm saying you want to add what committee members?
Can we ask him to restate it? And then he identify what members.
Okay, Ms. Bonner wants you to restate it and identify the members of the committee that you want involved.
I make a motion that the administrator and our attorney and member of the work session, Brandon Garrett and Ben Hassan, meet with Gold Cross and their attorneys with our MOU and information from the work sessions to iron out details of a contract to bring back for this committee for consideration. And I will add myself to that agenda item.
Did you get it, Ms. Bonner?
We got enough to be brought back at the next commission meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I got you, sir. Hang on a second.
And that's Mr. Clark's motion.
Okay, all right. Mr. Dennis Williams.
Ms. McKnight.
As a member of the Public Safety Committee, I'll be attending that meeting also.
Well, put Dennis Williams on there.
Okay.
All right. So we got a substitute with a whole lot in it. And I guess we'll just vote on it. Hang on a second. Anybody else? That was a substitute motion.
Yes.
Okay. We're voting, Ms. Bonner.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mason and Ms. McKnight.
This is the regular first motion, right?
No, ma'am, this is Mr. Clark's motion, substitute. Okay.
Mr. Mason. Vote.
That motion carries 9-1.
Well, Bobby Williams said no.
Bobby, he speaks for himself.
That's a little retaliation.
All right. So that makes 37 moot.
No, sir, we got a action there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Go ahead with 37, Ms. Bonner.
Well, 37 is mute. I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah. You got one. You got a win there, sir.
And 38?
38 was in
We consider
consent,
38?
yes, and 39. 38 and 39 were in the consent agenda.
Okay, so we're good then. Okay. We're adjourned.